Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of DevDrawer. Today we're going to be going over how to use Sass. So we're going to create our own custom CSS Sass, and I guess I want to make it where we can kind of recreate what we would typically use in Bootstrap, because y'all see me use Bootstrap a lot, but it's not the end-all solution. You can actually create your own. So before I get into it, if you like this kind of video, definitely subscribe to the channel because we got plenty of other videos like this. And if you want to, go ahead and leave a comment in the video and let me know what you thought about it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So first thing, let's Google Sass. Sass it's basically it's a way to dynamically create. Hold on, let me zoom out of this a little bit so that y'all can see it. Okay, so basically it's a way to create CSS on the fly using functionality, and then have it where something like Visual Studio builds your CSS file in real time based on the functionality that you're putting into your Sass. So if you've never heard about Sass, if you've never done anything with Sass, it is definitely something you should be looking into. You can go to sass-lang.com and that'll bring you up to the Sass website. You can kind of see some of the functionality that you can do inside of it, go into their documentation. It's a very cool way to compile your CSS, and let's say if you wanted to be able to create something, you could actually do like a for each loop inside of your Sass script that would then generate those classes inside of your CSS without you having to write every single class. So now that we're introduced into this, there's a few things that we need to do in order to get this set up. So inside of your Visual Studio editor, you can already see that I have it installed, but we're going to be using the live Sass compiler today, and this is going to be something that we can run at the bottom of our screen that will produce the live Sass, or it will produce the CSS by watching the Sass that we do. So as we make a change in our Sass, it automatically updates our CSS. Alright, so this is live Sass compiler, and again it's Ritwik Day. He's also the guy that created the live server, which we'll also be using today as well. So I guess let's go ahead and get started. Once you have those two things installed, this should be a lot easier for you to be able to set up your environment the same way that I have it right now. Alright, so inside of our I just created a random folder. This doesn't have to be run on a server. It could just be run in the from your desktop, which is the way that I created this folder. And inside of that folder, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it CSS. And then inside of this, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it, let's just say, style.scss. And then this will give us the script that it's going to be watching in order to produce our style.css. So let's just code something real quick. Let's create a variable, and let's call it body. And then that body is, we're just going to have this as the body color. So we're going to do 333, which is my favorite for the body color. And then we're going to create a body tag here, and we're going to use that color. So let's do color, let's see, color body here. Okay, so now this is going to be what's compiled inside of our style.css. Right now it is just the color, so this from this point down is going to be what's compiled. This part over here will be ignored, and it's actually going to take what we put in the SCSS or the Sass, and it's going to add it to our body whenever it goes to create that style. So what I want to do here is I'm going to click on watch SCSS, and it's going to see that it's watching it. And as it's watching it, it's going to be compiling it. So as you can see over here, it created the mapping to it, so it can see that whenever we make a change here, this map is going to reflect it on this CSS, which you can see here. We got our source mapping style.css.map. And essentially, this is what we want it to display, just this number 333. Also, let me go ahead and inside of our normal folder, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it index.html, just so we can kind of see what else we want to have on it. And right now we have our index.html. So inside of our browser, okay, I think I need to close out of this because it didn't, the live server didn't have an index.html, which it always requires some kind of view of the site. So let me close out of this real quick, and then I'm going to open it back up. I'm just going to close out of Visual Studio, then open it back up. Okay, so now I've opened my Visual Studio back up, and now we have this go live down here, and we can go ahead and click on Watch Sass again, and then we can go live, and it should open up in our browser just the way we want it to. So let's go ahead and generate some HTML. So let's going to use Emmet for HTML5, and then we're going to add the style.css to this, not the Sass version of it. So let's just call this Sass, I don't know, let's say tutorial. Okay, and then underneath that, we're going to add a link rel equals style sheet, and then we're going to do href equals css slash style.css. So let's go ahead and add some text in here. So we're just going to do a paragraph tag, and let's say this is a paragraph, period. Okay, so now back in our Chrome browser, it should automatically refresh, but we'll play around with that just a second. Okay, so let's get out of this too. Alright, so this is a paragraph. If we inspect this, make sure that y'all can see that. Okay, so y'all can see that. So we have our body is 333. So let's go into our style Sass, and we're going to change this. Let's just say we want to make the body red. So make that red, and we save it, and now you can see it updates it to red. So all of this is being done in real time, and it's generating that style for us. So this is the basic inclusion of Sass into your project. What we're going to do is we're going to, let's see if we can create our own grid system, our own Bootstrap kind of thing, and then I'll show you how it's done per like different size, so we can use like the column structure that Bootstrap has, so column dash MD dash whatever it is, so forth and so on. So let's switch this back, and I want to create a few variables. So let's get out of that, and I want to create a few variables that we're going to be using throughout the rest of the website. So we have our body font. Let's do a primary font. So primary font, and then well, let's import something from Google for their fonts. And I already have, I'm going to be using Open Sans and Roboto, so just to make it a little bit easier, I'm just going to copy and paste from what I already have. So I want my primary font of the website to be Open Sans, so we're going to do Open Sans, comma, sans serif. And if you need this specifically, this is inside Google Fonts. I just Googled Open Sans and Roboto, and then I just copied over the import URL. And then this is also what they give you to actually name that font on your style sheet. Okay, so let's do primary font, secondary font. So secondary font, and it's going to be Roboto. And then again, sans serif. Let's also create some colors. So we have our, we're going to do the basic kind of like Bootstrap color scheme. So first thing we're going to do is declare white, and we're just going to make it equal to white, just so we have that. Then let's do primary, and this is all the color codes based on Bootstrap that I've already looked at. So this is going to be #007BFF, and then that's going to give us Bootstrap's primary blue. And then let's do secondary, and this one is going to be actually, you know what, if you want to, you can copy all of those from Bootstrap. I'm just going to pull over what they have here. So I already have all of the color codes, and basically this is just the colors that they're using on their website for Bootstrap. So you can change these to do whatever you want them to be. You can name them differently, but this is the way I'm going to have it named for this tutorial. And all right, so trying to think where I'm at. Let me go back to here. This is a paragraph. So what I want to do is I want to create a style type that can be used, because we're going to be using these colors here for our the warning pop-ups for different kind of text. So you have like text danger, you have what is it called? You have a few different things. Let me open up Bootstrap's website so it might give you a bit of a clearer image of what I'm trying to do. So let's go to Bootstrap, go to the documentation, and let's go to content. I think it's typography for this. Nope. Components maybe. So one is going to be the alerts, because we are going to create a simplistic alert. So you see how they have it in different colors. And then we also have the text. I'm going to say it's utilities then. There's something around here. There we go, text. So now if we scroll down here, we should be able to see the different colors, or not. The colors are around here somewhere. They're in the documentation, but essentially we're going to be creating something that uses all of the colors. And in order to do that without having to create each one of these alerts inside of the CSS, we're actually going to create a variable, like an array variable, that we can then use to pull multiple times inside of our code. So I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call it style-type. Now you can call this whatever you want to call it, but for me it's going to be, this is what I'm going to be using for all of the code that we push through. So let's put a semicolon at the end of that, and we're going to do primary, and it's going to equal to that primary color, comma, and then we're going to do secondary, and I'm going to probably fast forward through this part because it's just pretty redundant. You got to do it over and over again. So let's do secondary. Okay, so now we have our array created of the various types that we're going to be using, and they're all based off of these color codes. Let's also go ahead and create a clear fix, just because we're going to be needing that. So let's do clear fix, and it's not $. We're going to do a % clear fix here, and then display block and clear both. Okay, so this is going to give us kind of the general information that our program is going to be using. So first thing we want to do is inside of our body, let's come over here and we're going to add a font family, and we're going to set this font family as our primary font, which is configured at the top. And then let's go ahead and set a font size. So font size, and let's just make it 16 pixels for now. And then we got the color bodies already done, and let's go ahead and add a padding of 2 rem and 0, just to have some padding on the top and the bottom of it. It's not necessarily important whenever you go to do your actual style sheet with it, but just for visual purposes of this tutorial, we're going to add some padding to it. So let's go ahead and also create 2 containers, because Bootstrap has 2 containers. So we're going to do the first one as container, and then we're going to do margin 0 auto, and then this is going to be a max width of, let's say, 1200 pixels, and then let's do a width of 100%, and then we're going to do the same thing for container-fluid, because they also have one of those. And you don't necessarily have to do this, but I'm trying to keep it kind of accurate with what we would see in the Bootstrap. So let's say we're going to make this 1800 pixels. And again, these numbers are completely configurable. It doesn't need to be done by you, and you can set it up to your preference. And now, since we've done all of this, we click back over to our style.css, you can see that it's adding over all of the information that we're doing inside of it. So everything that we're doing is being kept up on this side of it as well. So we can see everything changing here. So let me close out of this so we can watch this as it's happening. Okay, so let's go back to our index.html, and inside of this we're just going to wrap this inside of a, well, I guess I need to close this out. So we need to wrap this inside of our div container fluid. So div class equals container dash fluid, and then let's just wrap the entire thing inside of it like that. So now if we look at this, well, it doesn't have any padding or anything on it right now because the screen is very small on this side of it, so you're not going to be able to see it, but you can see that it does have it's contained inside of this. So if we inspect this, click here, so left click, container fluid, we can see that the max width is 1800 pixels and then the width is 100%. So if we switch this over to container, it would do the same thing. It would just use the other class that we created. So now we have our container 1200 pixel width, but there's no difference on it. So now let's get into some of the other generic things that we want to add. So we have our containers. Let's go ahead and do a text center. And if you are familiar with Bootstrap, you'll know most of these are classes that are pulling straight out of Bootstrap. So it's just to make it more simplified, because their naming scheme is very good. Maybe the execution of it, bloated and stuff like that, could be a little bit better, but their naming scheme is on par or on point with everything that needs to be done. So it's just very descriptive of what we want to do. So let's do text right, and then we're going to do text align right. And then let's also throw in a small tag just for good measure, and we're going to do display block, and let's do font size 0.25 rem. Okay. Alright, so this is going to be the basic setup of what we're doing. And then we're going to start creating our columns, and then we're going to start creating the other information like our buttons, our links, and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and start using some of the functionality to create our columns. So let's split it up so we can see, just add a comment saying grid so that we can see our grid here. So there's going to be different breakpoints that we want to hit with our grid. So let's go ahead and create the variables for our breakpoints. So let's do grid __ BP -SM, and then we're going to make it 576. And you can name these whatever you want. It's just in my head this part makes sense to me. So it's grid breakpoint small, and then you can name it whatever you want. So we're also going to do one for medium, large, extra large. So let's go ahead and set these up. So this is going to be MD, LG, XL. And then we're going to do this one at 1800 because that's what we set our maximum container fluid at. And then this one's just going to be 1024, and this is the widths of our breakpoints. 768. We already got 576, so let's leave that one there. And then we're also going to create another variable called grid columns, and we want to do the 12 column layout. And then we're also going to create another variable for our gap. So gap and then 0.25. And we're not going to add a pixel or a rim to any of these because we're actually going to use the SCSS to create that for us. So let's go down a little bit more and let's create our initial column. So if there isn't a MD, LG, SM connected to the column, we want it to still be able to display correctly. So let's do column. We're going to do grid row row. See, grid row row, and then we're going to do flex dash row. So we're using flex box in order to help us with the grid, just because it's going to make it a little bit easier for us to make everything fully responsive. Then we're going to do flex direction, and this one's going to be left. And then let's go ahead and do a margin, and on this margin we're just going to use our gap variable times 1%. Basically, the reason why we have to do 1% because as you can see here, if we do gap 1%, it's not going to work. So we're going to do gap times 1, which is essentially just recreating the gap over again. And I don't know if that's something specific with Sass, but I've always ran into the issue. So if you ever run into the issue where you're trying to get a number into a percentage or something like that, multiplying it by 1 or doing an actual multiplication will help with that. It's just that's an issue that I've seen before, so you might run into it, you might not, but that's just the way that we're going to do it for this one. So let's do float left. So that's going to create our basic column whenever we need it. And now we want to create the grid properties. So we're going to create a variable called map grid props. And then this is going to be another array. So we're going to do, if it doesn't have anything on it, we're just going to do 0. So it's not pulling anything. If it has the SM on it, we're going to be using the grid variable that we created at the top, grid __ breakpoint -sm. And then we're just going to create the rest of them the exact same way. So we got medium, large, extra large. So we're going to do medium, large, extra large to match the variables that we created at the top. And essentially what this is going to do, it's going to be looking for that column. If the column is using one of these dash, whatever it is, that's what it's going to assign for the property to be used on the if for each loop that we're fixing to create. Okay, so now we have our properties for the grid, and now we're going to create a mixin. A mixin is just basically like it's kind of like a function inside of Sass. So let's do mixin and then create mq, and then this is going to take the variables of breakpoint and min or max. And I'll show you how these variables are being used in just a second. So we're going to do an if statement. So at if, and then we're going to do breakpoint equals 0. We're just going to display the content. If it doesn't equal to 0, we're going to run this else statement, and inside of this else we're going to do at media screen and we're basically just creating these media breakpoints inside of our style.css. And then we're going to add a hash symbol, min or max dash width, and then this is going to be based on the minimum maximum width of our grid that we set up here. So it's going to add that min or max, which is going to be the where the actual breakpoint is. And I'll show it to you. It's kind of hard to explain while I'm doing it, but I'll show you the end result, and it should make sense what it's doing. It's basically just creating those media breakpoints for us. So breakpoint times 1 pixel. And again, we're using that times 1 because it's multiplying by itself. And then let's do at content. Okay, so now if we scroll down here, we can see that we're starting to create based on the column, and you can see that it also adds in all of the other like the WebKit version of it, the Internet Explorer, the Edge version of it. So you can kind of create it one time, and then Sass just kind of knows what it needs to do for the other browsers to be able to display it. So it's not displaying anything yet because we haven't called that function. So this function right here, we haven't called it yet, but we're going to create another function, and then we're going to start doing this in each loop. So let's create another function that is going to create the column classes. So at mixin create column classes, and then we're going to pass a modifier. So a modifier, we're going to pass the grid columns, and then we're going to pass the breakpoint. And then inside of this, we're going to include this function. So we're going to do at include, and then not that, at include create mq breakpoints, or breakpoint, and then minimum. So we're passing the variables that it's looking for, min or max and breakpoint. And then we're going to run through a for each loop, which is going to go through our columns here in order to display the actual columns that we want it to. So let's do @for I from 1 through grid columns, and then we're going to actually run the code that we want it to do. So let's set a variable called margin. And again, this isn't something that you would normally have to do it this way if you don't want to. This is just the math that I was able to find that would work with recreating the column structure from Bootstrap. So you can copy it exactly how I'm doing it, or you can create your own, whichever one makes more sense for you. But this is what I found that works. So we're going to take the grid columns, which we created here. So we got 12. We're going to divide it by I, which is going to be the current breakpoint that we're on, and then we're going to divide all of that by 100, which would give us the percentage that we're looking for the flex basis. Okay, so and again, that might not make sense right out the gate, but once you see it being done, it'll actually make sense. So I would recommend just kind of copying this as I'm doing it, because that is it's going to work. So you can understand it as you do it. All right, so now this, we're going to do minus hash $i. I'm trying to do this all off the top of my head, or remembering what I've created previously that actually makes this work. So it might take a little bit of time to do it. So flex basis, and then we're going to do the margin that we set at the top minus the gap times 2, and then we're going to multiply that by 1% here. And then let's go ahead and create a margin for it. So margin is going to be the gap times 1%, and then that should do that for this. So still, we don't have anything created yet because we're not technically calling these mixins yet, but this will do the functionality for us, and it'll essentially create the column structure that we need. So it's going to create the column dash MD dash whatever size it is, and then that's going to create the specific styles that are needed for it. So let's keep going down a little bit further, and down here, this is where we're actually going to start creating the columns on the style sheet. So we're going to do @each, and then we're going to pass the modifier, I think I spelled that right, modifier, and then breakpoint in map grid props, which was that variable that we created at the top. And then for this, we're gonna first we need to check to see if it's blank. We're just gonna set it as XS. So we're gonna do @if modifier equals blank. The modifier is going to be minus XS, and it's not going to subtract it, it's just going to add that as the class name. Alright, so then we need to include these functions that we've created. So include, I'll keep doing that, include create MQ, and then we're going to pass the breakpoint -1, and we're going to set this one to max, and then we're going to create the hidden modifiers as well. So let's go ahead and add the hidden class, hidden modifier minus let me see, minus down, and then we're going to do display none important, and then we're going to create another one that's going to be the same thing. Oh, not that. So we're going to copy this entire include, and we're going to move it down and we're going to again run through create. We're going to use a breakpoint, and we're not going to do -1 this time, and we're going to set this one to min. And then this one is going to be the hidden modifier for up. So that way we can use hidden dash LG dash up to create our where it hides it at certain levels. All right, so let's see what we got here. So we have where it's starting to generate everything now, and we have that does not look right. I think I have something messed up in my code, but I'll go back and look. But it's adding this else inside of here. So let's go back up here and let's just look at what we got. Else. Why is that else breaking? Oh, that's because it's supposed to be at else. So at else. There we go. All right, now that should fix that. So now there we go. All right, so it's doing our media screen, and it's doing our hidden, our up and down, our hidden modifiers. It still doesn't look right. It's supposed to be hidden modifier. It's supposed to be passed. So again, I'm trying to do this from the top of my head off of remembering what I've done previously. So give me just a second. So we got hidden modifier. Let me make sure I spelled this correctly. So we got modifiers being passed. Modifier is blank. It's going to be dash XS. Then modifier down. Modifier up. Column hash modifier minus #1. Okay, so just looking at it briefly, I can see one thing that I did wrong was margin, but that's not what's going to affect us. So we have our modifier here. So let's check it. So we get modifier, modifier, modifier. Okay, so what's missing is the $sign. So it's a variable. So if we do that, now if we switch over to our styles, there we go. XS, XS, SM. So now we have the hidden variables that we can use. So if we do hidden dash MD dash down, it'll hide everything that's with the max width of 767. Anything below that, it will display none. So we have our hidden modifiers set up. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start working on the actual grid part of it so we can do our column structure. This one is basically we need these because I use the hidden parts a lot, and I actually kind of forgot I did those first. So this part is going to be actually getting into the row and the column structure. Okay, so let's first, we're going to create our row, and for this we're going to have our margin is going to be gap auto, because we want to make sure that we're using this gap here, just 0.25. We want to make sure that we're using it everywhere that we possibly can. So we're going to have margin gap auto, and then this is going to give us, we actually probably need to add a px. No. We'll see what that generates. Okay, and then what we also can do inside of Sass is use the ampersand, and then that's going to basically take whatever the parent class name is, so dot row. It's going to take it, and we're going to be able to add to it. So we're also going to add inside of this is going to be row dot row is essentially what we're going to be creating here. Row dot row, we're going to do display flex, and then flex wrap, and then we're just going to set the width to 100%. And then inside of that, now we're going to add each. So at each modifier breakpoint in map grid props, and then we're going to include the class that we're fixing to create for the create columns. Create column classes, and don't need that, so we're going to do modifier grid columns and then breakpoint, and that's there. So now if we switch back over here, we can see that it's creating our row, column 1, column 2, column 3. So this is without the breakpoints on it. These are just the columns if we wanted to do them by themselves, or we could use just dash column, or not dash column, but dot column. And then we also have the percentages, which are being dynamically generated at the top up here. So you have your dynamic information. It's taken the math that we did, and it's adding that percentage of what the width of that column would be. Okay, so now that should do it for our row. Let me see, column there. Okay, there we go. So now we have our MDs as well, our LGs and our XL. So all of our columns are now being created just basically using this code right here. So I mean, it's using all of this code, but this is what, instead of us having to write each one of these, which is currently 441 lines of code, we only have to write 137 lines of code, then it generates the rest for us. And let's go ahead, and I'm just going to add some styling to the HTML so that we can see the columns that we're actually producing. So we're going to do body. Let's do background color, and let's just make it like a kind of like a gray color. And then here we're going to do dot row dot grid, and then we're going to, and the reason why I'm adding dot grid here, you wouldn't normally have to do it, it's just because I'm going to be displaying the columns on the HTML page, but I'm also going to be using the columns. So I'm going to create a class on the index.html that's .grid, so that only that part would use this styling. That way we can display the other things the way we want it to without having to worry about, you know, the background color and all that kind of stuff. All right, so let's do class asterisk equals column dash, and then that's basically going to take everything that has column dash in it that's inside of that grid class. All right, so let's do and dot higher, and this is just going to be adding some minimum height to it. I don't know if we'll actually use that or not, but I'm referencing based on my old code, and that's something that I might have used, might not have used, so it may not even be important. So let's do min height 30 pixels for the generic one. If we do dot higher on that column, it'll push it up where it's 60 pixels. Probably won't use it, but just in case, we have it there if we want to display it. Then I'm just going to create an outline of 1 pixel solid, just do another gray color, and then we're going to do display flex, and let's do align dash items, and then we're just going to make it center align, so when we actually do the column names, they'll just be a prettier interface. So justify, not justify items, justify content, and then we're going to do, it's going to be space around. Okay, and then we also want to do the just standard column the exact same way, so because it doesn't have the column dash on it. So we're just going to do the standard column. I'm just going to copy and paste what I had inside of there because I want it to display the exact same way. So this should give us our information that we can go ahead and get started over here. So inside of our HTML page, I want to be able to display this grid so you can see what it looks like. So give me just a second. Okay, it is a lot. So I'm not going to bore you with me having to type all of this out. Essentially what I'm creating is a Bootstrap style grid that is using the grid class in order to display it the way I want it to be displayed. And as you can see over here, it's actually displaying it in column structures. So you have your 12 column structure. You have 8, 4 equals 12, 2, 5, 6, 8, 12, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 12. So this is using our 12 column structure, and it's displaying it exactly the way that we want it to. However, it's not doing it white background, so let me make sure I did that right. I did not. So let me add in a background dash color, and we're just going to make it white here, and then we're also going to do it to our regular column as well, so you can see it a little bit better. Again, this is not something that you would include in your project whenever you get done with it. So if we removed it, you can see that the column structure still works. It's just it's not pretty right now because for display purposes, I want to be able to display like a kitchen sink version of our Bootstrap, and in order to display that appropriately, we want to have that code in there. So let me just go ahead and add in some a comment here. So this is just going to be for display purposes, so that way I don't confuse myself whenever I go to edit the code later. Okay, so display purposes, I'm just going to add that. No, I deleted it. Go back. Let me just copy over what I actually added to it. There we go. And now fast forward everything. There we go. Alright, so that way I know it's just for display purposes, and it also reflects that inside of my CSS that it's creating for me. So it's just adding the display purposes for me. Okay, so that is how you would create a column structure. And now let's go in here and start creating some other things for our text, because we did create those variables at the top. Let's let me scroll up in my source code a little bit so I can make sure I got the classes right. Okay, so we got our columns. Let's start with the buttons. So inside of our index.html, I'm going to go ahead and add some buttons on here as well, so that we can kind of see what those would look like. So let me just add in some HTML. I'm copying this from some other work that I've done. So underneath this, so we have our column structure. I'm just going to add in, let's do, instead of a break tag, let's do an HR, so it splits it up, and then we're going to add in some buttons. So right now those buttons, they have no styling associated with them, and this is just basically calling out all of the classes that we're going to be using in order for it to display. So right now they have no styling to it, but as we start editing the Sass, you'll be able to see these buttons start coming to life a little bit. Alright, so we got our display purposes here. I'm going to put right below the columns, I'm going to add another comment called buttons. And let's take that. Alright, so now let's create our generic button. Nope, not a dash. Okay, so let's just create our generic button, and inside of that we're going to do a border radius of 5 pixels, and again this is all based off of Bootstrap, so you don't have to keep it this way, but this is all being based off. I'm trying to make it look like Bootstrap so that whenever we get done it'll actually be recognizable. Alright, so border style solid, we're going to do padding of 0.5 rem, and then 1 rem for the top and the bottom. And then let's do text decoration, none, and then outline, none, just because I don't like the outline in my styles, so just want to remove it all together. And then we're going to do a margin bottom, and we're just going to add 0.25 rem, and then display inline block. Okay, so now if we look over here, we can see that we have all of the buttons. They're starting to kind of take shape. They're starting to take form, but we also need to do specific ones for these classes so that they actually work. Okay, we need to create a button small and a button large, because if you're familiar with Bootstrap, you'll know that that's one of the classes that they use. So we're just going to decrease that font size, and we're going to make it 0.75 rem for the small button, and then we're going to decrease the padding. Let's do 0.5. No, the padding's going to be the same. Actually, you know what? Let's not do the padding. The padding can be the same. So let's do btn-lg, and we're going to do font size of 1.25 rem. Okay, and inside of the Chrome browser, you can see that the button's a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger. So it's all being integrated as we type it into our Sass, and it's generating the information that we need over here. Okay, so now we are going to kind of sort of do the same thing that we did with the the columns. We're going to create a each loop that loops through each one of these, and it's going to change it based on what it's looping through. Okay, so let's come in here and let's do at each type, because you remember the type is what we declared at the top. Style type is what we declared in the top, and that's going to be just the class names. So if I scroll back up to the top, we have our style type of primary, secondary, success. And the reason why we created this as an array is because we can reuse that in the text, we can reuse it in the button, we can also reuse it in the little notification sections. So once we get done creating this, we can pretty much recreate the alerts and the text in the exact same way. All right, so first thing we're going to do is .btn, and we're going to add our hash symbol, and then this is going to be the type variable, and then we're going to do background dash color, and it's going to be based on the class, because that class is calling the color code at the top that we created first. And then color is going to be, for the typical buttons, we're going to use the white color, but that won't work for every button, so there's going to be something that we have to do in just a second for that. So border color, and then again that's going to be the class, so that the border matches the background. You can also again change that to whatever you want. So we also want to add in the at hover, so the button hover, what we want it to actually do, and I'm going to simplify it a little bit. Instead of doing different colors for each, I'm just going to lighten or darken the background. So not at, it's going to be ampersand focus, and then ampersand active. And again, this is just a personal preference for me. You don't have to do it this way, but you can if you want. And then I'm just going to darken the background color a little bit. So background dash color, and we're going to do darken, and then we're going to pass in the class, and we just want to darken it by 15%. Darken is a Sass thing, so it helps out with a lot of stuff. So you have darken and lighten, and we're going to be using the darken for this one. Then we also want to do the border color as well. So let's do border color. Okay, so that should give us our generic looks. No, it didn't. Let me see, what is it doing here? That's why, because it doesn't have the dash in between, so we need to do btn dash, and there we go. So now it's updating exactly the colors that we want to use. However, some of these are not coming through, so I need to check what it's doing. But it's doing the color, the hover for us. It's doing, if it's active or something like that, it'll work out the way it needs to work out. So the success, there has to be something amiss up here with how I named it. There we go, we got 3 C's inside of it. So we update that, now we have our success button. So one of the cool things about using this, the live server and the live Sass, is the ability to see some of the issues that you need to see immediately. So one thing we want to do is take a look at this light. The light is very, very white. We're not wanting this to be muted because we have a muted class. Light should be different, where it's not displaying the white text, it should be displaying the black text. So let's scroll down a little bit to where we're creating our button, and then we're going to come underneath this, and we're going to do an if statement if the type is light. So at if type equals light, and if it equals light, that's type equals light, we're going to take the code that we did here, and we're just going to change it up a little bit. So let's copy this. We're going to do btn, and then it's going to be class color, and we're going to change this to the body color instead of white, so that it actually uses that 333 color that we've created in the beginning. And then everything else, that should be fine. So now if we go back to our browser, you can see that the light color is now changed to a darker color, so it makes a little bit more sense. Alright, so now let's say we want to do something similar, but we want to do it to the dark, where whenever you hover over, we don't want it to hover darker, we want to hover lighter. So right now you can't tell there's actually you can barely tell there's a hover between it. So what I actually want to do is check to see if it's got the dark class, and if it does, we are going to, and this is not, we don't want it to do an if statement, we want to do an else statement. So we're going to do else if dark, and then we're going to pass the white again because we want it to have the white color, and then instead of over here, instead of doing darken, we're going to do lighten, and then the same thing for the border color as well. So lighten there, and now if we hover over, you can see that it's a lot more easy to tell what that hover is actually doing. But that's pretty much it. That's how you would create multiple, I guess, buttons using a for each loop and an if statement. That's essentially all you need to create in order to create all of these. So it makes Sass makes it so much easier to be able to write dynamic CSS that you're going to be doing repetitive classes or anything like that. It's a lot of really cool stuff. Yeah, so I think that's it for the buttons. Let's see, we can also do the same thing for the links, I believe. This one should be a little bit easier. So let's come down. So we got our buttons. We're going to come down here. We're going to create another section called links. Okay, and then inside of my index.html, I'm also going to create some links right below the buttons. Alright, let me take this. Let me just close this out for now so I can see what I'm doing. Also, let's close that out so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now we take this, and this is going to be our standard buttons. So let's put in like an h2 tag here for buttons. And then right below this, we're going to put in a h2 tag for links. And then I'm just going to copy in, it's kind of the same, but you got your text instead of your btn. And we're just going to paste that. So since I didn't really show you guys this part of the code, I'm going to show it to you real quick. So we have our standard btn, which is using our button class, and then our btn primary, and then we have the small version of that, and then we have the large version of that. So that's essentially what is creating this look here. So we have the standard, small, and then the large, and now we have our links down here. And let me go ahead and get rid of this super small text because it's not something that's really important right now. Whenever you go to create your own kitchen sink, you might want to add some of those classes so that people can look at the code or look at the endpoint of it and see what code needs to be done in order to create a large button. But for right now, we don't really need that. Alright, so now we have our links. So let's go back to our Sass. And inside of our Sass, we're going to, this one should be a little bit easier because we're not really worried too much about the dark and the light versions of this. So let's do an at each type class in style and style dash type. And then inside of this, we're going to create a dot text dash, and then the style, the type that's being passed. So type, and then the color is going to be kind of the same way that we did it up for our buttons. So color is going to equal to the class here, and then we're going to do a ampersand hover and ampersand focus and an ampersand active, and then this is going to be color darken class, let's do 15% again. Well, just accidentally closed out of my style sheet here, and let's open this back up, move this back over, make sure it's saved. Okay, so now if we go past our buttons, we should be able to see the links. So we got text primary, and then the hover state of that, secondary. So now if we open this back up and go down to our links, we can see now that we have the hover. It doesn't look like it's really changing to me. So let me see what we're trying to look at here. So we got this, and we're going to do the hover for it, and it's darkened, so it's not passing. It's let's see, what did I do here? So color, darken, class 15%. Okay, so let me look at my code to see why it's doing it. So we got darken here. Oh, okay, I see. There's a space here. So if we remove that space, save it, now we can do our hover state. And yeah, that's a lot more prevalent. So the dark one's not working, so we can do the same thing that we did. So we got our default and lighten. Okay, the light one's good, so let's just do a dark. So we're going to do an if statement. I'm going to copy over what we did for the buttons just so I don't have to retype it. And now we're going to do @if type equals dark, and this is going to be text. So we want to do the color of class, keep that the way it is, class, and then we're going to remove the background color because obviously we don't want the background color to be on this one. And then we're going to do a color, just a regular color, then we're going to remove the border color here. So now if we hover over dark, I mean, it's very subtle. So let's take this and let's make it like 45%. There we go. So now the dark is a little bit better, the light is better. Then the rest of them just do the dark versions of themselves. So that is that's how you would do the links and be able to use those colors that we have created. All right, so let me see what else. Well, I think for this tutorial, I think I'm going to call it. I think in the next part, I might want to get into, let me add an HR here, split it up. I think in the next part, I might want to get into the image classes that we can create, but once you've gotten it this far, you can recreate a lot of it. You reset this to 70% so that you can see it a little bit better. So you can recreate a lot of what Bootstrap does for your image classes, for your alerts and stuff like that. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end this tutorial here, and maybe in the next tutorial I'll go into how to do the image classes, the alerts, but basically it's the same thing we just did here. And let me show you one more thing before I end it. So just because I'm a perfectionist, I like to go back and demo things. So let's say if we wanted to change our primary color and we don't like their blue, let's just change it to, I don't know, let's change it to this. And now we can see that it's, you know, it changes throughout the entire, every place that's using that primary color is now changed. So if we had alerts down here, that would also change. So let me undo that and go back to this. So again, I think that's going to end it for this tutorial. If you liked what you saw, let me know how it works for you in the comments. Give me a thumbs up and let me know if you want me to create more videos like this. But I'm hoping to, by the end of this, be able to create a structure for our own kind of Bootstrap. It's not necessarily something that I would use in the future, but being able to know how to use Sass in order to be able to create a large style sheet like Bootstrap is something that it's very good as a developer to know, and Sass also works very well whenever you're doing like a React or a Vue app. It works very well for pretty much any kind of project you want to do. So this is just kind of like the introduction into that, and creating our own Bootstrap is kind of a way to easily show you guys the capabilities of it. But again, I think I'm going to call it here. Look out for the next video where I'm probably going to go into a little bit more in depth and actually create like a fully functional Bootstrap without all of the bloat. So again, if you haven't subscribed and you like these kind of videos, definitely subscribe. I have new videos every Monday, I think at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. So if you're interested in this, subscribe and hit that bell notification so you'll know whenever I'm pushing out a new video. But I think that's it for now, and I will talk to you later.